It's possible to invent anything. A soul flight, the Barrel House Blues on a Saturday night, where you'd be today if you'd turned left out of the door and not the other way. God save your dreams, and your hands, those compass needles that quiver with applause for the light. But remember, no figure of speech is bright enough to light your way home. Open your throat before the sun pulls down the afternoon and the leaky boat of language leaves the safety of the shore. Start by naming everything you tried to resist. The blood-red road, her willing breast, the North Star, the trigger of a gun, or the arms of the good book. His hands cooling on the white sheet, veined as snow-stung leaves, lifting and settling into the speckled ground. You know, sorrow is memory's sister. Everything calls your name. Next, don't underestimate the whirling forces of once upon a time. Here's one. A man steals his brother's flock, but charms himself into favor again with the fetching sounds he can make from the hollow of reeds. Everyone plays a fool, you know. Anansi knows and coyote and raven, and they rummage your house at night for shiny trinket tails, aided and abetted by the rhythm of the moon. Or there's the one about Mahalia, rebuked and scorned, or a man named Willie Johnson blinded at 7, and they sang, oh yes. They raised light from dark water, dug diamonds out of the cold, cold ground. And once upon the strains of the rolling prairie, a stone angel, and a song for the song of Piper Gunn, hungry cries from the boreal plain, and a song for the river that runs behind you will run beyond. Dry lips, and Northern Ontario and blue, blue windows, your urge for going, the early morning rain, the train you were going to ride, or the legacy of her grandfather, a Nisei shipped to Alberta to plant sugar beets, the thrumming of the war, how we bore it all with a quiet grace that hums in your limbs. A melody as pure as you're ever going to hear. So ask yourself, when desire strums you like a fingerboard, what else can you feel but faith? How it resonates. Listen, you are the meantime. Walk into the water, and when the vibration summons your bones, you know you're coming home. Let yourself burst into the silence. Follow your hands, those fishes of wonder. Dodge the swirling foam, the net, the rocks. Dodge this metaphor. Reach for the one true note that shudders, the story you cannot resist. It will find you and it will enter you. It will make you. It will make you sing. I don't even know where to begin to thank everybody. Maybe I should thank Greg for what I've got in my throat right now. Did he run out the door? Anyway, that was a wonderful reading he did, fabulous. Anyway, thank you everybody at Words Aloud. I honestly, you treat everyone like gold. I've never been in a festival quite like this. So Caitlin, Laura, Hazel, Sean, Brian, Richard, Gwen Lamont, Liz, just absolutely amazing. You've made everything possible. And I noticed too, I'm trying to figure out where I was on the map, because I want to read a little bit about my Anishinaabe foremothers, who are originated in Fort Severn. And I thought, so I thought I'd Google that. Well, of course, Google doesn't have it. I thought, oh, it really was. At the time, it wasn't the middle of nowhere. It was a very important trading post. But I did realize, okay, if you wanted to travel to Fort Severn, where my ancestors were from or started out, it would be the equivalent of driving to Winnipeg from here. So, quite far up. And it's wonderful here to be on the Saugeen Peninsula and to be on this land. there are two quotes that I refer to often, and I'm going to organize my reading a little bit around those. The first one is by Linda Hogan. Has he still gone? He's gone. Okay. Linda Hogan. Suddenly all my ancestors are behind me. Be still, they say. Watch and listen. You are the result of the love of thousands. And then Marilyn Dumont, who's a Métis poet. And this one really came home for me because I realized that most of the work I've done since I started writing poetry, and I didn't start writing poetry until I was 50, I realized that it was really about trying to find home. This is your story, even though you haven't told it all or don't know how to tell parts of it yet. By starting the story tells you how to go on and how to look back. So most of my poetry has been about memory, heritage, faith, family, a lot about grief and loss, trying to, as Tim Lilburn would say, trying to live in the world as if it were home. And so half of my time is spent writing and half working with writers, which is, you'll learn a whole lot about your own writing when you're working with others. So it's been wonderful. What's that? Oh. Here he is. He doesn't know he's going to get a round of applause, does he? Yay, Greg! Okay, many. Greg, when I got up here, my voice was going, and so I was looking for you so I could blame someone. Anyway. Many years ago, I took a group of writers to a place outside of, to a vineyard, actually, outside of Santiago in Chile. Wrote a few poems there, and this is one of them. Oh, I hear a little person. A star, it's called Horse. A star followed me to the end of the dark road where I found a horse. I had set out for an evening walk. Behind me was a field. Behind the field, a mountain. In the indigo above the mountain, a star, my bright companion. As were the dogs. Did I mention the quiet husky, the curious, frantic pup? Did I mention the green hallways of vineyard beside the road? But I was telling you about the horse, his presence, dark and heavy as the smell of his coat. Having startled each other, we called out, each in our own language. He allowed my hand to touch his sturdy neck, my fingers to stroke his nose, but neither of us moved closer. This was not the night to ride. The wind had already dropped her invisible scarves somewhere on the field. Trees and birds were quiet. The dogs kept their distance. I tell you the only truths I know. It was dark. A star followed me. I found a horse. I did not ride. Thank you. As I said, I wrote an awful lot about grief. I had a series of losses, which is pretty typical of most of us in the world, especially when you get to a certain age. And I wrote this, my mother died about 10 years ago or so on Christmas Day. And so I had gone to visit her, not realizing that she was about to die. So everyone in the family was caught up short. So those of you who have dealt with some pretty intense grief might relate with this one. Just so you know, you will feel awkward, as though emerging from the dark with lime green hair, your eyes rumored to be radioactive. Someone will mention angels, better rewards. Another will channel the sticky wisdom of a country song about new stars in the sky, the significance of certain dates, 3 crows, or the doctor's slip of the tongue, redemption written into the final clutch of a hand. What you thought were vapors of the fantastic harden, herniate the everyday. Oh, he knew, or she knew, or you surely must have known. Must have known. Like Jesus on the wall of the Tim Hortons, there were signs. Yes, there were signs. Just so you know, you won't. They didn't. There weren't. Meaning is what you try to wear, like tight black shoes you found in a rush at the thrift store because you hadn't planned on a funeral, greeting the forgotten, your startling green hair drawing words from others' mouths as they avert the danger in your eyes. I'm sorry, they say, I'm sorry. You must be, and you walk as carefully as anyone who is blistering can walk, impossibly, carrying hot tea in a cup, across a room roaring with the mortal who reach now for pinwheel sandwiches, pickles, perhaps one of those nice Nanaimo bars. Aha. Nova Scotia, in case people don't know, is known for our thrift stores. We're all thrift stores. Yes. Get off the plane and we'll tell you at least 6 you can start with. This is called secondhand philosophy. It's a day to listen to country music at the local thrift store, wearing the soft corduroy shirt with a funky smell you don't want to wash out. A day to pick through the racks and overhear the young woman with a wail in her voice talk about her night course. I was kicked out of the other one, she says, leaning over the table to the clerk with the aimless eyes who is sorting shirts into long sleeves and short. I was kicked out for, what do they call it? Confidentiality. I said things out loud I shouldn't have. I need to learn to write it down or keep it in my head. It's a day for separating sleeves by length, shirts by color, for wondering where to draw the lines that shape us between what we think and what we tell. To wonder about detours, small divinities, the aisle that holds red and orange polyester dresses with bent foam shoulder pads that someone once wore to a dance, perhaps, felt beautiful. Or the 2-chord tune that urged us to ride our horse, darling, to dream that dream. Tales that fell apart, tidings that can't be gentled into story, cannot slip easily over our hips. Bright, broken buttons we wear out loud. Thank you. I'll just read a little bit from this collection. This is largely about grief and loss and poetry. And at that point, I was, like Gray, beginning to think a little bit about my own heritage, my past, and curious about where I came from, why where I came from was silenced. And I was exploring memory, and I spent a whole year just researching memory. So I'll just read a short section from this. Stone, amulet, photograph, charm bracelet, cufflink, fish story, house, facial expression, tape recorder, verse, or the same old traveling salesman joke. We have places and means to store memories. Memories ground us even as we know they are fleeting and flawed constructions that slip through our consciousness, ghosts of ghosts. One cold winter, I stayed in a guest room in my mother's apartment complex for 3 days. Because she had lost her sight, I sat at the table in her overheated and stuffy kitchen with the frozen slider window and tried to describe photographs as she tried to recall names and events. I emptied out the dusty closet she'd ignored since my father left, and we talked about knitting patterns, the cost of her mother's milk glass bowl, the old clothes she could only know by rubbing the fabric through her fingers. I climbed on a chair to reach a serving dish she wanted me to have, and when I found a note inside, written by my sister-in-law, save for Annette, the two of us guffawed. It's okay, she said. I want all this gone. All of you, take everything you can. When I pop off, I don't want any belongings. Our family had moved frequently, and my belongings always fit in a single box, as a student in the back of the car or inside a backpack. Now, in her 9th decade, my mother wanted to return to the simplicity she too recalled from her days on a small farm outside a small town. On her deathbed, she insisted on having her head shaved, and frequently the nursing staff came into the room to find she had stripped off her Johnny shirt and her covers. The philosopher Simone Weil said that all we possess in the world is the power to say I. Memory is a cracked bowl, and it fills as it empties. Memory is what we create out of what we have at hand. Other people's accounts, objects, flawed stories of our own creation, secondhand tales, handed down like an old watch. Annie Dillard says, as a life's work, she'd remember everything against loss, and go through life like a plankton net. I prefer the image of the bowl, its capacity to feed us, the humility it suggests, its enduring shape, its rich symbolism, its hope. To write is to fashion a bowl, perhaps, but we know finally the bowl cannot hold everything. This book was several years in the making. As I alluded to earlier, my past was kind of kept from me. Yay, Charlie, who knows what she is doing. Thank you. This book is like a scrapbook, and it really is the journey of, finding bits and pieces. I started out because my aunt Kay, who's now 104 and a half and 3 days. And many years ago, she said, well, she talks like this. You should really find out about you. And she wanted to tell me all about Catherine. And I didn't know anything about it. Of course, in my family, we'd moved around. My father worked for the railway, so we were all over the prairies in different spots. And I didn't know very much about where we came from, and I didn't know how much of our past was kind of suppressed or not talked about, because back in the day it wasn't. So Aunt Kay urged me, and I think she said to me at the time, I'm almost 100. I'd really like to know. So off I went. And really it was one of those side genealogy projects you take on at a certain time in your life. But then it became something else, because I tried to find as much information as I could about Métis women, or back in the day as they were called, half-breed women, find out as much as I could about them. And until the early 1800s, there was nothing written about them. They weren't even on the page. They weren't in explorers' journals. They were nowhere. I was lucky to find an old shelf of books deep in our university library, all written, 200 years ago or more. And I went through them, and I actually found some of them online, thank you. And I thought I'd do a search. Of the first 6 books I looked through, there was no mention of the words woman, women, girl, wife, nothing. And I thought, who do these guys think brought them into the world? So it took a while. And then once I started to find these really tantalizing bits and pieces about stories of these women, I thought, no, this is more than just my quest for learning about my past. And I started to document them. So this book is just full of small stories about women in Red River. And Red River, as you know, is the area, it includes Winnipeg and up towards Lake Winnipeg through Selkirk. And that's considered the birthplace of the Métis people. And I'm happy to answer questions about that, because I know it's a hot topic nowadays. So if anyone wants to ask about it afterwards, I'm absolutely delighted to talk with you about it. But I would just read the opening. Oh, I meant to bring my iPad. I wanted to show you a picture of Aunt Kay. She's a pistol. Oh. Yeah. She landed in the hospital and kicked up such a fuss, they sent her home. Okay. The story of Catherine, it has to do with when there was a lot of shipping back and forth from the north of the lake down to Winnipeg. And I didn't realize at the time, but that was the largest stores of fish and fur in the early 20th century that there ever was. It was massive. And then that whole industry fell apart. Selkirk, Manitoba, August 1908. Time slows down, then it flies. Summer here is muggy, close, and sticky. I imagine you on the gangplank, turning around to wave at one or more of your children, now grown. Was it Nettie? Malvina? Other passengers shaking their handkerchiefs in the smoky air cheer as the SS Premier moves slowly away from the Selkirk dock to begin its cruise north. The wind picks up, cools the back of your neck, riffles hats and hair of the passengers, and drives mosquitoes away from everyone's damp skin. Catherine Kennedy Couture, great-grandmother in my mind's eye, over a century away. It is 1908. Your husband, Antoine, is working as a cook, almost 1,000 kilometers north of here. You have paid the equivalent of a man's monthly wages for passage on this steamer, one of several that weave in and around inlets and islands on Lake Winnipeg, to dock days away at Warren's Landing, several kilometers from the mainland community of Norway House. It remains a mystery to me how, having raised 11 children largely on your own, you are able to afford the fare. It's a luxury cruise. Wealthy tourists from eastern Canada and the fast-growing city of Winnipeg are now able to see the land your ancestors have known for centuries. Settlements have grown. Everything is changing. The SS Premier passes Cook's Creek in the old St. Peter's Reserve, northeast of Selkirk, where fishers set out stakes on lines they attach to stone-filled cans to alert them to the presence of a catch. Their gray huts and tents would be a marvel to those standing at the ship's guardrail, few of whom would know you had relatives there. You'll stop at communities along the bank of the lake to wood up the steamer. As the ship keeps its pace of 5 miles per hour, some passengers will go below, escaping sparks and ashes spewing from the stack. Some will have arrived from the east by railway, the Iron Horse bringing curiosity seekers and hopeful settlers along the southern section of what once was called Rupert's Land. The breeze picks up. The steamer makes its way out of the mouth of the Red River and into lake waters. Like any of us on a voyage, you must be hoping for good weather. This is storm season. 2 years ago, almost to the day, the SS Princess sank off Swampy Island, taking 6 people with it. The storm rose, shattering the vessel as the captain tried in vain to turn it around. It was Canada's worst inland maritime disaster. Your cabin is below with the cargo, and later you'll descend the crowded stairs to settle in. The ship is stocked with supplies for Norway House and farther north, as well as empty crates to be filled with rich fish harvests at Warren's Landing and brought south. On return trips, steamers and before them York boats have been filled with finery, musical instruments, china, stoves, tools, and household goods shipped from Europe. I know so little about you. Europe. In 6 years, the Great War will break out. Your youngest, Edgar, will die from his wounds. You'll never see the winter of 1919 when influenza cut such a swath. Men drove carts along Manitoba's streets to gather dead bodies to store in huts for burial in the spring. In 3 years, your daughter Eleanor will marry Charles, an Irish-American who migrated north. You'll miss the wall of sweet peas in Eleanor's Saskatchewan garden, her mason jars of jellied chicken and Saskatoon jam. You'll miss knowing your grandchildren. In 2 days, the SS Premier will dock at Warren's Landing. Some passengers will take smaller vessels to Norway House, about 50 kilometers away. Others, like you, will stay at the landing. You'll spend time with Antoine in the boarding house, and when it's time to return to Selkirk, at least 2 of your adult children working there with Antoine will see you to the dock. For the trip home, everyone is required to board at night, ready for an early morning sail. What happens next will be documented in newspapers across the globe, an event I learned about years ago from your granddaughter, Kay. It's a story that will tug at me, draw me to the river to uncover your past and the lives of your ancestors and other Red River women. As stories go, when I search for yours, I'm searching for mine as well. You are 49 years old this summer day. You were born either on St. Peter's Reserve or in St. Andrews. Your father was a member of the Peguis Nation, signatories to Treaty 1, a Kennedy who traveled to Red River in the early 1800s. On your mother's side, you descend from Mascoaniniac, otherwise known as Swampy Cree, near Hudson Bay. You're listed in the census, but I can find no official record of your birth. For all the advances in science since you were born, we still cannot wrinkle time. And so I'll begin by making my way to Selkirk to search for your story, hoping print records and artifacts survive. As your granddaughter Kay reminds me, however, there weren't the same rules then. People made things up. But this much I know. As you head out of the mouth of the Red River to open water on that warm August day, you won't come home alive. I'll finish up with just a short poem, also written in a vineyard. And again, this was Chile, where time change does things to your sleep. Mind you, if you're a writer, everything does something to your sleep. Is that not true? This is called Wild. All night you hear the birds, hundreds of them restless, erupting, the racket filling the meadow, mocking the mountain, the cold stone calm of the old paper bark tree. What force opens their throats? What promise has been broken? What currents of hope and fear rush through those fragile bones, spring into their eyes, batter blood through the small devices of their hearts? Listen. Nothing lasts. Quiet can be stolen like your bag in the street. You will soon be awake in all the wrong places, your words snatched out of time. Oblivion is a wise old teacher. There is no try. It's all right. You didn't get it until this moment, did you? Wake every chance you get. Join the chorus. Praise the wild. Carry light.